The twin sisters lived right next door to me in our quiet suburb. Ever since we were toddlers, they fought over which one of them would get to marry me. Our parents always joked that no matter which girl I picked, our families would be tied together forever. But when we got old enough to actually settle down, they both said those years were just childish nonsense. The very next day, they started fighting over a different guy named Jasper. To make Jasper laugh, they pushed me into a freezing river over 6 feet deep, knowing full well I couldn't swim. As I thrashed around, gasping for air, they pointed and giggled. Look at him flailing like a drowning dog. Isn't it the funniest thing you've ever seen? They only pulled me out when I was seconds from passing out just to satisfy Jasper's cruel curiosity. That was the moment my heart turned to ash and I moved far away from that city. But later, they started hunting for me like they'd lost their minds. That was the last time I ever trusted anyone who said they loved me. My name is Elias Vance, and for the first 18 years of my life, I thought I had found my people in the 2 girls next door. Lena and Mira Cole were their names. They were identical in every way, except for the tiny mole above Lena's left eyebrow. We grew up in a sleepy coastal town called Stillwater Bay, where everyone knew everyone, and the biggest scandal was usually a stolen lawn gnome. My parents died in a car accident when I was 16. It was a rainy Tuesday, and a drunk driver crossed the center line. I remember the police officer at my door, his hat in his hands, and the way his voice cracked when he said the words. After the funeral, I stood in our empty house, surrounded by the smell of old furniture and grief. I didn't know how to go on. That's when the Coles took me in. They had been our neighbors for over a decade, and their daughters had been my best friends since we were in diapers. Mr. Cole was a high school principal, and Mrs. Cole taught piano lessons out of their living room. They set up a guest room for me on the 2nd floor right next to Lena's room, and across from Mira's. They said I was family now. They said I would never be alone. For 2 years, I believed them. Lena and Mira were the center of my universe. They argued constantly over who got to sit next to me at dinner, who got to borrow my hoodies, and who I would walk to school with in the mornings. It was a game to them. A sweet, competitive game that made me feel wanted. Lena would make me coffee every morning, and Mira would make me lunch. They would leave little notes in my backpack. One said, "You're our favorite person." Another said, "Don't ever leave us." I kept every single one of them in a shoebox under my bed. But then Jasper Holloway moved to Stillwater Bay. Jasper was a transfer student from the city. He wore expensive watches, and his father owned a chain of luxury hotels. He had this way of speaking that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He was charming and funny, and he had a cruel streak that he hid behind a smile. The girls were captivated within a week. I watched it happen in slow motion. First, it was small things. Lena started canceling our coffee mornings. Mira stopped making my lunch. They started spending all their free time with Jasper. And when I tried to join them, they would look at me like I was a stranger who had wandered into their private party. The river incident was the breaking point. It was Jasper's birthday, and he wanted to do something exciting. He said he heard that I was afraid of water. He said he wanted to see if it was true. Lena and Mira laughed and said it was just a joke. They said it would be funny. They said it would make Jasper happy. I told them I couldn't swim. I told them the water was freezing and the current was dangerous. They didn't care. They grabbed my arms and dragged me to the bridge. I begged them to stop. I begged them to remember who I was. Lena looked at me with cold eyes and said, "Don't be such a baby, Elias. It's just water. It's not going to kill you." They pushed me. I remember the shock of the cold. It felt like 1,000 needles piercing my skin. I went under immediately, and the water filled my nose and my throat. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't breathe. I was thrashing and kicking, but my body was sinking. I heard their voices from above. They were laughing. They were pointing. They were calling me a drowning dog. And Jasper was standing between them with his arms crossed and a smile on his face. He was enjoying it. He was enjoying my terror. They pulled me out when my vision started going black. I lay on the riverbank, coughing up water and shaking uncontrollably. Lena knelt down next to me and patted my head like I was a pet. "See," she said. "You're fine. You were just being dramatic." Mira handed me a towel and said, "Jasper's happy now. That's all that matters." I looked up at the three of them standing over me, and I felt something inside me die. I walked home alone that night. My clothes were soaked, and the wind cut through me like a blade. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the ice that had formed around my heart. When I got to my room, I packed a bag. I didn't have much. Just some clothes, and my parents' wedding photo, and the shoebox full of notes. I took the shoebox and I carried it to the backyard. I dumped the notes into a metal trash can and I lit a match. I watched them burn. Every promise. Every "I love you." Every "don't ever leave us." They turned to ash and I felt nothing. The next morning I left. I didn't say goodbye. I took a bus to the nearest city, and from there I took a train to the opposite coast. I had a small inheritance from my parents. Enough to rent a room in a shared house and start over. I got a job at a bookstore. I spent my days surrounded by other people's stories. It was easier than living my own. But Lena and Mira didn't let go. They called me 100 times. I let every call go to voicemail. They texted me for weeks. "Where are you? Come back. We were just joking. You're being too sensitive. Jasper misses you. We all miss you." I deleted every message without reading them. But they kept coming. One night I was walking home from the bookstore when I saw a familiar car parked outside my apartment. It was a silver sedan with a dent on the passenger side. I recognized it immediately. It was Mr. Cole's car. Lena and Mira had driven it across the country to find me. I stood on the sidewalk frozen. My heart was pounding and my hands were shaking. I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear. But before I could move, the door of the car opened and Lena stepped out. She looked different. Her hair was shorter and there were dark circles under her eyes. She walked toward me with her arms outstretched like she was expecting a hug. "Elias," she said. "Thank God we found you. We've been so worried." I stepped back. I said, "Don't come any closer." She stopped. Her face twisted into a frown. "What is wrong with you?" she said. "We drove all this way to see you. We missed you." Mira got out of the car too. She stood next to her sister with her arms crossed. "Elias," she said, "you're being ridiculous. We came all this way, and you're just going to stand there like a stranger." I said, "You pushed me into a river. You laughed while I drowned." Lena rolled her eyes. "It was a joke. We told you it was a joke. Jasper wanted to see if you were really scared. And you were. It was funny." Mira nodded. "You always take everything so seriously. It's exhausting. We were just having fun." I said, "You could have killed me." Lena said, "But you didn't die. You're fine. You're standing right here. So can we please stop talking about this and come inside?" I said, "No." I said, "Go back to Stillwater Bay. Go back to Jasper. Go back to your perfect little life and leave me alone." Mira stepped forward and grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight. Her fingernails dug into my skin. "Elias," she said, "you owe us. We took you in when your parents died. We fed you. We clothed you. We gave you a home. And this is how you repay us. You run away and make us look like the bad guys." I pulled my arm free. I said, "I don't owe you anything. I said you stopped being my family the moment you chose him over me." Lena laughed. She actually laughed. "Chose him over you," she said. "Oh, Elias. You were never a choice. You were just there. You were convenient. You were a warm body to fill the empty space. But Jasper is exciting. Jasper is interesting. Jasper makes us feel alive." You just make us feel tired. Those words hit me harder than the river ever could. I turned and walked back into my apartment. I locked the door. I leaned against it and slid down to the floor. I could hear them arguing outside. They were fighting about who was going to drive home. They were fighting about who had wasted more gas money. They were fighting about whether Jasper would still be waiting for them. They didn't knock again. They just left. A week later, I got a letter. It was from Mrs. Cole. She said she was disappointed in me. She said I had broken the family's heart. She said Lena and Mira were crying every night. She said I needed to come home and apologize. She said family forgives each other. She said love meant never giving up. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it and put it in a drawer. I never responded. 3 months passed. I got a new job. I started taking night classes at the community college. I was studying graphic design. It was creative and technical, and it kept my mind busy. I met a few people. They were nice. They didn't know about Stillwater Bay. They didn't know about Lena and Mira. They just knew me as Elias, the quiet guy from the bookstore. But then one day I came home from work and found my apartment door slightly open. My heart dropped into my stomach. I pushed the door open slowly. Lena and Mira were sitting on my couch. They had let themselves in with the spare key I had hidden under the flower pot. I had forgotten to move it. They were eating my food. They were watching my TV. They had made themselves at home. Jasper was with them. He was lounging in my armchair with his feet up on my coffee table. He smiled when he saw me. "Elias," he said. "Finally. We've been waiting for hours." I said, "How did you find me?" Lena waved her hand dismissively. "You're not that hard to find, Elias. You use the same email password for everything. We checked your old accounts. We saw your address in your online shopping profile. It's not rocket science." I stood in the doorway. My hands were shaking. I said, "Get out." Mira laughed. "Get out," she said. "This is how you greet family." We drove all the way here again. And you're still being a brat. Jasper stood up. He walked toward me with that fake smile plastered on his face. "Elias," he said, "I think we got off on the wrong foot. I want to be your friend." "Really? The girls told me so much about you. I think you're great. I said you wanted to watch me drown." He shrugged. "It was a joke. I told you. It was just a joke. You need to lighten up. You're too tense. You should smile more." He reached out to pat my shoulder. I flinched away. Lena stood up and marched over to me. "Stop being so dramatic," she said. "Jasper is trying to be nice. Why can't you just accept that? Why do you have to make everything so difficult?" I said, "You broke into my apartment. You invaded my privacy. You're sitting on my couch eating my food and you're telling me I'm the difficult one." Mira stood up too. She was angry now. Her face was flushed. "Elias," she said, "you are the most ungrateful person I have ever met. We gave you everything. We made you part of our family. And you just threw it away because of one little mistake." I said it wasn't a mistake. It was cruelty. And you enjoyed every second of it. Lena said, "We were just having fun. It's not our fault you're so sensitive." I looked at the three of them standing in my living room. I looked at Jasper's smug grin. I looked at Lena's cold eyes. I looked at Mira's clenched fists. And I realized that they would never understand. They would never apologize. They would never see me as anything other than a prop in their story. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the drawer where I kept my important documents. I took out my passport and my birth certificate. I put them in my backpack. Then I walked back to the front door. I said, "You have 5 minutes to leave before I call the police." Lena laughed. You're not going to call the police, she said. You're too weak. You've always been too weak. I pulled out my phone. I dialed 911. I pressed call. The operator answered. I said I have 3 trespassers in my apartment. They broke in and they won't leave. Lena's face went pale. Mira grabbed Jasper's arm. Elias, she said. You're not serious. I said I am very serious. The operator asked for my address. I gave it to them. I said, please send someone quickly. Lena and Mira scrambled to grab their bags. Jasper walked to the door with his hands up. He was still smiling. He thought it was all a game. He thought I would hang up and apologize. But I didn't. I stayed on the phone until I heard the sirens. The police arrived 3 minutes later. They escorted Lena, Mira, and Jasper out of my building. They told them not to come back. They took a report and gave me a case number. They said I could file a restraining order if I wanted to. I said yes. I filed it the next day. That was the last time I saw them in person. But they didn't stop trying. A month later, I started getting emails. Lena had found my work email address. She sent me long, rambling messages about how sorry she was. She said Jasper had left them. She said he took all the money from their joint account. She said he moved to another country with a girl he met online. She said she and Mira were devastated. She said they realized now that I was the only one who truly cared about them. She said they made a mistake. She said they wanted me back. I deleted every email. She started using different addresses. She would create new accounts just to get past my filters. The messages got more desperate. Elias, please. We have no one else. Our parents are furious with us. They said we ruined everything. They said we drove you away. They won't even look at us. Elias, please just talk to us. We miss you. We love you. We never stopped loving you. I read one of them all the way through. It was from Mira. She wrote about how she had cried for weeks when I left. She wrote about how she kept my photo in her wallet. She wrote about how she had baked my favorite cake on my birthday, even though I wasn't there. She wrote that she couldn't sleep because she kept dreaming about the river. The river. She mentioned the river. She said, I know we hurt you. She said, I know we were cruel. She said, but we were young and stupid, and Jasper was so charming. She said we didn't mean it. She said we would do anything to take it back. I stared at her words for a long time. I remembered the shoebox full of notes. I remembered the way they used to fight over who got to sit next to me. I remembered Lena making me coffee every morning. I remembered Mira staying up all night to make me a birthday cake from scratch. I remembered the way Mrs. Cole called me her third child. I remembered Mr. Cole teaching me how to fix my bike. Those memories were real. I couldn't deny that. But so was the river. So was the cold water filling my lungs. So was their laughter echoing above me. So was Jasper watching me drown with a smile on his face. And I realized that the two things couldn't exist together. The girls who loved me and the girls who pushed me into the river were the same people. They didn't change. They just showed me who they really were. I sent one reply. One sentence. I said, I hope you find peace. But I am not your peace. Then I closed my email. I went for a walk along the beach. The sun was setting and the waves were calm. I watched the water and I didn't feel afraid anymore. I just felt tired. I moved again after that. I left the city and I went north. I found a small town called Pine Ridge. It was surrounded by mountains and the air was crisp and clean. I got a job at a local design studio. I started hiking on the weekends. I bought a small house with a garden. I planted vegetables and herbs. I learned to cook for myself. I learned to be alone. A year passed. Then 2. I thought about Lena and Mira less and less. They faded into the background like old photographs. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that they had moved back to Stillwater Bay. They were working at their parents' house. They had both lost their jobs. Their reputation in town was ruined. Everyone knew what they had done. Everyone knew about the river. I didn't feel sorry for them. I didn't feel happy either. I just felt nothing. One evening, I was sitting on my porch watching the stars when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered out of habit. "Hello." A voice said Elias. It was Lena. I recognized it immediately. My heart started pounding. "How did you get this number?" I said. She said, "I hired a private investigator." It took me 2 years, Elias. 2 years of saving money. 2 years of working crappy jobs. But I found you. I said, "Why? Why won't you just leave me alone?" She said, "Because I need to tell you something." She said, "I need to tell you the truth." I said, "I don't want to hear it." She said, "Please, please just let me talk." She said, "Jasper's dead." She said he died 6 months ago. He was in a car accident. He was drunk and he drove off a cliff. He died instantly. I didn't say anything. She said I thought I would feel relieved. But I don't feel anything. She said I thought about you. She said I thought about what we did to you. And I realized that we killed something inside you. And we never even apologized. We never even said we were sorry. We just kept making excuses. We kept blaming you. We kept pretending it was all a joke. She said, "I'm not going to ask you to forgive me. I'm not going to ask you to come back. I just wanted you to know that I know. I know what I did. I know it was wrong. And I will never forgive myself for it." She started crying. I heard her sobbing on the other end of the line. I said, "Thank you for telling me." I said, "That took courage." She said, "I love you, Elias. I never stopped loving you. I was just too scared to admit it." She said I was scared of how much I needed you. And Jasper made me feel like I didn't need anyone. But that was a lie. It was all a lie. I said, "I know." I said I was scared too. But it's over now. It's time to let go. She said, "Will I ever see you again?" I said, "I don't think so." She said, "I understand." She said, "Goodbye, Elias." I said, "Goodbye, Lena." She hung up. I sat on the porch for a long time. The stars were bright. The air was cool. I thought about my parents. I thought about the day they died. I thought about how alone I felt. I thought about the Coles taking me in. I thought about Lena and Mira fighting over who got to marry me. I thought about the river. I thought about the cold water. I thought about the laughter. And then I let it all go. I went inside. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat on the couch. I opened my laptop. I started designing a poster for the town's annual harvest festival. It was simple and joyful. It had apples and leaves and a bright blue sky. I smiled. I smiled because I realized that I had survived. I had survived the river. I had survived the betrayal. I had survived the years of loneliness. And I had built something new. Something that belonged to me. I never spoke to Lena or Mira again. I never went back to Stillwater Bay. But I also never stopped being grateful for the time they gave me. The time before Jasper. The time when we were just kids who didn't know any better. They were my family once. And even though they broke my heart, they also shaped me. They made me stronger. They made me careful. They made me appreciate the people who actually show up. I have friends now. Not many, but good ones. They know my story. Not all of it, but enough. They know that I have scars. And they don't ask me to explain them. I have a garden. I have a cat named River. Ironic, I know. But I like the irony. I have a life. It's quiet. It's simple. It's mine. And that's more than I ever thought I would have. The twin sisters lived right next door to me in our quiet suburb. They fought over who would marry me. They pushed me into a river. And I walked away. But I walked away with my head held high. I walked away with my heart still beating. I walked away and I never looked back. Because the people who love you, the people who really love you, they don't push you into rivers. They don't laugh while you drown. They hold your hand. They pull you out. They stay. And I finally found people who stay. I found them in a small mountain town. I found them in a design studio. I found them in the quiet moments. The cups of tea. The shared meals. The long walks. The conversations that don't demand anything. I found them in myself. And that was the most important discovery of all.